Rolling.
Hey everybody, welcome in South Plains College inside the T Club today, as we're pleased to be joined by track and field coach Erik Vance joins us. Coach, you've gotten the indoor track and field season underway, and I guess maybe the short way to do this is track and field works a little different than everything else. There's a standard that's set. You need to meet such standard in order to qualify for the national tournament. So I guess my question is, are we taking one bus or two to the national tournament? How many we got qualified already? Normally they pile up pretty quickly. It seems
they do. You know, we've been out 3 times now this indoor season. This past weekend was probably the least productive, and not because we didn't run well, but when you put up 30 plus qualifying spots in your first 2 meets out, you kind of run out of things to qualify. Honestly, I mean, it gets a little tougher. We've got, I think, 67 marks right now that I think are qualifying, and that's multiple athletes have 2 and 3, you know, that they've qualified in, and they won't necessarily run all those events. I mean, we have some distance runners that they've qualified in 4 different events and 5 different events, and obviously you can't do that in the course of a 2-day meet.
Sure.
But they. You know, we're where we need to be. They've done a really good job of getting out and getting their business handled when we go and competing. So this week should just be a nice week to polish up.
Let's talk about a couple of kids that were given some accolades this past week. Some Athlete of the Week awards, if you will.
Well, we had 2 this week. It's the first ones we've had on the year, and we were excited to get them. 2 of our international athletes, actually. Laquan Nairn from the Bahamas. He's a sophomore long jump, triple jump guy for us, actually can do the high jump as well. He actually, unfortunately, got injured very first trip down the runway last year, indoor. So he spent the entire year out last year, really worked hard to come back. I think really came back better, was able to be back practicing in September. And he got into a long jump competition down there that, you know, involved 4 to 5 of the top 10 jumpers in the country, regardless of division, and really acquitted himself well. Ended up being 4th place, jumping 25.7. So he got recognized as the Coaches Association Athlete of the Week. And then the other one was our Canadian girl Natasha McDonald. She made her debut in the 400 this week, and in her first collegiate indoor 400, you know, just ran a 55:30.
Oh, dude,
just the best time.
Yeah.
Just the best time in junior college so far this year. So that was exciting. I knew she'd run well, but it's funny because if you've ever seen Natasha, she is not a small person. I mean, she is 6'2", probably at least.
I can buy that.
And she's fast. She's very fast. But she doesn't ever look like she's moving fast. So you watch her run, and she doesn't feel like she's moving fast. And she always seems to overestimate what she ran, and I tell her, and she's thoroughly surprised. But I was surprised by that race. I thought she'd run fast, but watching it, then the time comes up, like, oh, wait a sec, we just ran probably the fastest time in junior college.
And that was a debut for her.
That was her first. She'd run the 400. She's actually only run. She ran the 600 at OU, and then ran the 400 at Tyson. We asked her to run the 400 leg on both our relays last week at A&M. She ran the 400 leg of our DMR, and then ran our 400 on our 4x4, and didn't do an open event.
Now, for you folks that don't follow track and field, you just heard the words OU, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, the Tyson Invitational. Is one of the biggest track and field meets, if memory serves me correctly, the country, going on up in Arkansas.
It is one of the top indoor meets that goes on in the country. It's multiple number 1, nation leading marks came out of there. Like just for example, in the 4x4, the men's 4x4, they had 2 heats of invitational 4x4. I believe when all was said and done after those 2 heats, I believe 6 or 7 of the top 10 times in the nation in the 4x4 this year had come from those 2 heats. So they're not messing around when we get out there and compete against those folks at that meet by any stretch.
And the other thing about track and field for the folks out there, and I try to reiterate this point frequently, is you have to forget about the NJCAA thing, or the NCAA Division I thing, or the 2 or the 3 or whatever, because it's all one big show when you go to those meets. It would be the equivalent of taking Steve Green and his Texans up and putting them on the floor against the Kansas Jayhawks at the Allen Fieldhouse, because these kids all get lumped into one big pile for these things. So to go out and compete well in something like that, it's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and it's tough. Sometimes it's tough on our kids because we have some kids that are, they're used to winning. I mean, we have kids like Laquan that went out and he was top 5 at this meet. But I mean, Natasha, she ran extremely well. Top time in junior college as a freshman. I think she'll move along, but she's competing, not only against Division I kids, but to add to that, kids that are seniors in college. And she's a freshman and she's in her first ever track season, and these kids have been doing it for 4 or 5 years. So when she has a 20th place finish, we've got to remind her, hey, wait a sec, you're okay. You're a freshman that finished 20th, and a freshman that competed against these are the best kids in the country, period, and you finished 20th. That's good. When we get them in the national meet, then it's a little bit different.
Yeah, because when you go to the nationals, now you're talking about splitting back into the normal classifications.
Right. Yeah. And I think the biggest thing on us as far as the classifications that really is an advantage to those Division I schools. I think we have Division one level talent, but the fact that kids are just older, it makes all the difference in the world to have juniors and seniors running out there instead of sophomores and freshmen.
Yeah, and if you can process that mentally as an athlete and realize that discrepancy, if you will, in the age, that to me it seems like it's a great way to push athletes, especially when it comes to races, because you're chasing the person that's ahead of you, and if that person's running faster, by de facto, you're going to run faster too.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can frame it the right way and you get the kids to believe in what you're talking about and get them to realize, hey, we want them to want to be first every time out. But after the fact, sometimes you got to come back and say, look, it's okay that we weren't first or second or third. It's okay that we weren't on the podium, and just kind of trust the process of what we're trying to go to, and just make them understand the level that they're competing at. And that's part of why we go to those meets, is because, like you said, somebody in front of you is running fast. It's hard not to run fast chasing them. Even if you don't beat them, you can sure improve what you can do right behind them.
And of course, a great opportunity for these junior college kids to get looked at by some of these Division I schools as well. It's got to be a great recruiting tool for those schools to have these JUCO athletes at those events.
Oh, it's a giant advantage for everyone all around to be on campuses. It's good for schools to have our kids on their campus, to see their facilities, to do things like that without having to bring them in on an official visit. Eventually, some of our kids will go on an official visits, and Laquan actually, is an Arkansas signee, so he knows. I mean, he was going. That's where he's going to be home for the next 3 years.
He's going home, if you will, right?
But it's also an advantage for us, to say, hey, we go compete against these big schools, against these coaches, and you're going to be lined up against, kids from LSU and Clemson and A&M and OU, and you're going to line up in heats with those kids, and the coaches are going to be watching their kid, but especially if you're right there with them, or if you beat their kid, be like, hey, who is that? Who's that person that, we should probably recruit?
There you go. Any other highlights we need to cover as far as this indoor season is concerned? You're talking about over 60 qualifications already, and as you mentioned, it's not going to be covered every event. Kids qualifying different things and get moved around. Any other highlights for you though through the first part of this indoor season?
Well, our sprinters and our 400 runners have been running really well. I'm really happy with where they're at. Time-wise, we have several of them ranked in the top 10, a bunch ranked in the top 15, 20, which right now is kind of where I feel like we need to be. We've got a little while till nationals, and we don't want to run number 1 times week 1 and not ever come back to it. But they're running well, 4x4. I think the men are first. The men are first by a couple seconds, and the women are just behind in second. Our freshmen are really competing well. Sophia Bright's a girl we have from Ghana. She's top 10 in both 60 and the 200, running really well for us. Obviously, Natasha's doing well. Marisha Prado from Trinidad, who was a finalist for us in the 1 and 2 last year, is running at the 4 this year for us, and has run really well, and is on the 4x4 that's run well. So they've done well there. The guys, I mean, it's hard to pick out and say this person and this person, but they're just, I mean, they're competing really well. Also, our distance kids, I've been really proud of what they've done so far. Our kids that contributed well and did well in cross country have come back, and they're looking good on the track. They're qualified. I mean, we've got distance folks qualified everywhere from 800 all the way up to 5K. I mean, we have someone in every event all the way up doing well. Cece, our girl from Amarillo, she went to Tascosa in Amarillo. She's number 3, I believe, in the 5K. Won the 5K actually at Tyson last week at Arkansas. So they're doing well.
Now, you mentioned a week to polish up because the indoor season, I'm sure you show up for that first day of workouts, and the next thing you know, you turn around and go, wow, it's indoor nationals already. It's a very, very quick season. We talk about the indoor. It
is fast and furious. We got to campus with our folks on January 10th. That's the day they arrived, but we didn't practice that day. January 11th was our first official practice. 3 days later, we were competing at OU in a meet, and then we're a month and change later right now, and we're 2 weeks away from the end of it. We'll have this weekend. We'll go to New Mexico Junior College and compete. We'll have a week off, and then we go and we're done. And so it's a pretty quick 2 months.
Literally turn and burn.
It is. There's not a lot of time to mess around. We talk about it all the time that if you don't train over the break, it's hard to be good in track in the spring. If you don't train over the break, it is pretty much impossible to be good in indoor season because it is so fast.
Now, you talked about going to New Mexico Junior College. Where do we head then for the national meet in 2017?
We go to Pittsburgh, Kansas. It's at Pittsburgh State. They have a 300-meter oversized flat track, which is supposedly really fast. Very, very nice facility. So haven't had the opportunity to be up there, but we're excited to go up there because I think it's going to be a good meet for us.
The indoor flat track that's really fast. It's interesting there as well because when you get in indoor situations, you'll end up with the tracks that are banked. And for you folks that are think about it like a NASCAR track. You get the high banked curves, but you also get these flat tracks, and different tracks, especially indoors, run very different ways when you're talking about place to place.
Absolutely. I mean, we started the year at OU, and OU has really, really good facilities. Their indoor track is more of a practice type facility, though. And they have a 200 flat track, which is 200 meters. So basically, if you take an outdoor track and you shrink it in half. So your curves get pretty tight. The straightaways are not particularly long, and especially we're talking about athletes that are tall and long. We're talking about Natasha being kind of open and not looking like they're moving very fast. It's hard on them on an indoor 200-meter track to really run quick. The bank is a little bit more helpful to those kids and for everybody because you can keep your speed through those curves. Very similar in size, you bank, you can run faster through the curve. But Pittsburgh, it's actually a full 300 meters for the track, so it runs much more similar to an outdoor track.
You get the longer straightaways, curves are a bigger sweep.
A lot wider curves,
easier to keep the speed.
You can kind of keep going. So we've seen some results coming out of there, and the times have been very solid. So I think we can go put down some really good times when we're out there.
There you go. See, we got you through physics class here today too, folks, because we're all about the educational side of this thing too. Coach, Steve is out of time for this one. Any final thoughts for us before we let the team get ready to get to New Mexico JC and get ready to make that trek up to Kansas here in a couple of weeks?
We appreciate you coming out, and New Mexico will run Saturday, and I believe the first thing we've got is at 9, and we'll have some folks really start our running at 1, so if anybody wants to come out and make a short drive, come over and see us. It's about the closest we'll get until, May 5th, 6th, we go to Lubbock, so This will be the closest to a home meet we're going to have this year.
Coach, best of luck to yourself and the Texans and Lady Texans. Look forward to hearing great things out of you over the next couple of weeks and to the outdoor season here pretty shortly. And we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Sounds good.